Welcome to Building the Future, hosted by Kevin Horick. With millions of listeners a month, Building the Future has quickly become one of the fastest rising programs, with a focus on interviewing startups, entrepreneurs, investors, CEOs, and more. The radio and TV show airs in 15 markets across the globe, including Silicon Valley. For full showtimes, past episodes, or to sponsor the show, please visit buildingthefutureshow.com.
Welcome back to the show. Today we have Swati Chaturvedi. She's the CEO of Propel. Swati, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Kevin. It's great to be here again.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you on the show. I looked it up before we were recording. You were episode 9, and by about the time this airs, you'll be about 400 or so. So I've watched you guys over the years, and you guys have, you and Propel have popped up in the news from some big publications in the last little while. So you guys have grown like crazy. But maybe before we get into all that stuff, let's get to know you a little bit better and start off with where you grew up.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. So history of me. I grew up in India and I completed my undergraduate studies in India.
Very cool. Came
here for my graduate studies. Went to Berkeley, MIT, worked as a management consultant for a while, 5 years, actually a long time. Then did my MBA again at MIT.
Nice.
And started out in investing. So I did my first started out with Siemens Venture Capital, brief stint there, and then moved to San Francisco to work at a private equity firm. Did that for some time, then realized I really wanted to do early stage. That's when I changed gears. But let me stop there.
Sure. Okay, so walk us through your journey up until Propel and what exactly is it?
Okay, sure. So as I said, I used to be working at this private equity firm, and I realized that I am really much more passionate about early stage startups, companies that are changing the world. And in private equity, you're really doing a lot of later stage work. It's quite operational. It's very financial modeling also oriented. And you do work with companies, but they're definitely much more mature. And you're working on shaving off costs for the most part.
Right.
And what I was really passionate about was companies that are using technology to change the world. That was the big thing for me. I thought maybe I can participate in startups as an angel investor.
Okay.
So I started visiting various angel groups here in and around the Bay Area, thinking that I would find something that made a lot of sense to me, that would meet my goals. But I didn't, primarily because way back in 2012 is when I'm talking about.
Sure.
All the companies that were pitching at all these angel groups were so low more. That was the mantra, social, local, mobile, at that time. And given my own passion for science and technology, I didn't feel compelled, which is not to say that these companies aren't impacting our lives. They are. They certainly make it easier for me to get my food and hail a ride and so on. But they aren't changing the world meaningfully in that they aren't solving the world's greatest challenges. They aren't helping cure cancer, for example.
Sure.
They aren't helping create abundant energy for everyone on this planet. They aren't helping create abundant food, and so on. So those are the big challenges, and certainly I think it's worthwhile to live to have an impact on these. So not having found what I was really looking for, I started the MIT Angels Group along with my classmate, Li-Sheng Wang, who then later became my co-founder at Propel. So we started the MIT Angels with a focus on deep technology startups. That was around the first time we started using, or anyone started using that term, deep technology startups. And we defined these companies as those that are founded either on a scientific breakthrough or significant engineering innovation. And we started this off initially looking at MIT-related deal flow, so companies that were started by MIT alumni, and then expanded from there. And we launched this angel group in 2013, and very quickly it became very successful. Surprisingly,
Very cool,
There
though.
were a lot of companies, from MIT, from Berkeley, from Stanford, that are developing new therapies, new diagnostic tools, new energy solutions that find it hard to raise funding. What we concluded in about a year was that these technology startups find it really hard to raise funding, especially in the earlier stages.
Sure. Like before they have
And so
revenue, do you
then,
mean by early stages? Sorry to interrupt you.
yes, certainly before they have revenue is for sure, but most of them don't even have proper products in hand,
Okay.
right?
So,
Or most of them will have a proof of concept of some sort, but it takes time to actually and money to develop the actual product.
right.
So, so it's hard. It's hard to raise funding because the time to revenue is so long. And so we started Propel X as a way to help these companies raise financing when these are the companies that meaningfully change the world. And by the way, they also use great returns. Look at Tesla, or look at Genentech or Illumina, companies that are founded on science and technology and change the world.
Sure.
So that's how we started Propel X. We launched our website in 2014, and hopefully that summarizes my journey to becoming an entrepreneur.
No, I think that's really great. So how has Propel X stayed the same and evolved over the last few years?
Sure. So I think we have stayed true to our mission.
Okay.
We started out as a platform to help raise financing for deep tech companies, and that is something that we still do. We're still focused on that. That's our branding. Our brand has been, I would say, recognized and established by many in the industry. We've appeared in all of the major media, whether it's CNBC or VentureBeat or whatever, Fortune or Wall Street Journal. So we were in the Wall Street Journal last year.
Very cool. Congrats.
And others. Yeah, so we've been recognized by major media, both national, local, regional, whatever. We've been on NPR. We've been recognized. We have a lot of support over the years. We realized that many of our startups actually came from the SBIR program. So the government actually funds early stage science-based companies through their proof of concept. So we found that most of our startups, in fact, are backed by these government programs. And so now, as we started doing more and more to help these startups, we ourselves received a lot of support, not financial, but certainly emotional, marketing, all that kind of thing, the goodwill of these government organizations, whether it's the Department of Energy, the National Science Foundation, National Institutes of Health. We develop deep relationships there, and we get now a lot of deal flow directly from these sources, which has been great. So we've stayed true to our mission, but yes, we have grown. We've grown in stature. We've grown in branding. We've closed 60 plus deals in these past few years. And so things have been on the up and up, which is great. But again, they've also been the same in that we've stayed true to our mission. I think the one thing that is quite different now is that we're doing later and later rounds. So initially we started out with a focus on seed funding only. But turns out these companies, as they mature, they come back to us for their Series A, Series B, Series C, even we've done.
Right.
So we're raising larger and larger rounds for these deep technology companies, and we've also seen some to their exits. We've had 5 exits so far.
Well, congrats, that's huge.
And we are, we're keeping our fingers crossed for many more.
Sure. So I want to dive a little bit deeper into how do you guys work with investors, and then let's get into the startup side.
Sure. So how do we work with investors? Absolutely. So first thing that I should tell you is that is a little bit about our business model,
Sure.
right? So essentially we are this marketplace, this website where we display. So companies will apply to get listed. We screen these companies, curate them, and then the companies get published on Propel X, right?
Sure.
At the same time, there are investors worldwide. We have a lot of international investors. They register on Propel X. They give us some information. We make sure they're accredited. We make sure that they're suitable for high-risk investing. And then they become members of Propel. And then they can browse the companies, and if they see something they like, they can invest online. So that's the way that works, right?
Sure.
But the important thing is that as a marketplace, in any other industry, whether it be the Amazon marketplace, eBay, OpenTable, there are so many marketplaces. Every marketplace takes a cut of the transaction, right? Kickstarter. Right. So if you raise, for example, $10,000 on Kickstarter, Kickstarter will take 8% of it, $800. But if as a financial services company, you want to be a marketplace, turns out you have to be registered with the regulatory bodies. So there are certain bodies that regulate financial services. In our case, it's called FINRA. So that's the Financial Industry Regulatory Authority.
Okay.
So we are actually a member of FINRA, and as a result, we are authorized to take a cut of the transaction. If you're not a member of FINRA, you can't do that. So our business model is whatever the amount of funding is raised, we take a percentage of it, a success fee.
Okay.
So that's the way we work with investors, and actually that's the way we also work with startups. So investors sign up, and if they actually make an investment, they pay us 2% and the startup pays us 5%. Gotcha. If they're investing really small amounts, we need to put them into a syndicate. Syndicates are expensive. So then in that case, they pay us the 2% standard transaction fee, but they also pay a 10 percentage points of the carried interest.
Got you.
I can go deeper into this if you like. I know I'm going over this really quickly.
No, I think that's good. The one thing I do want to dive a little bit deeper on is what's an accredited investor? I think some people know what that is, but others don't know what that is.
Yeah, sure. So per the definition of SEC, an accredited investor is someone who, if you're an individual, then you should be earning $200K or more in annual income. And the way to test that is, did you earn $200K or more in the past 2 years? And is that your expectation in the future as well?
Okay.
That's how we test for that. Now, if you're a household, right, let's say you're married, for example,
sure.
Then the test is, did you earn $300,000 or more in your past 2 years? So basically together with your spouse.
Right.
Did you earn $300K or more? And do you expect to earn that also in the future? So that's the test. And then there is this asset-based test. So let's say you're a retired person. You don't have a job anymore. You don't have an annual income. But hey, excluding your main home, your primary residence, excluding that, do you have a net worth of $1 million or more?
Okay.
If yes, then in all three of these cases, you're qualified to be an accredited investor. And to be very clear, the SEC does not require some kind of a certification or any such thing. You should know whether you meet these criteria, and if you do, then you just say, yes, I'm accredited. It's not like you need a certificate or any such thing.
Got you. Okay, very cool. So obviously, I think if you're an investor and you've been doing this a while, you know obviously what you can and can't do. But I'm curious to know, how does a startup get themselves on Propel? You mentioned it quickly, but I want to kind of dive deeper into that.
Yeah, sure. So originally when we started out, it was really word of mouth. We were mainly getting MIT network startups because they knew of us through the MIT angels, right? But since then, it has really grown. So the word has spread, and most of these organizations that I talked about, whether it's National Science Foundation, NIH, DOE, Department of Defense, NASA, all of these kind of know about Propel, and we speak at many of their events. So those are marketing efforts for us, right? And so we, just through getting this word out, we get a lot of applications.
Sure.
And when a company applies, we ask them to submit their basic contact info and a pitch deck and some basic write-up about what they're doing. And we evaluate the company to see if it meets our criteria. Now, we do have some basic criteria to get the company on board. Number one is it a deep technology startup? By our definition, which I told you.
Yeah.
So when we have a phone call with the company, we really grill them on what is your specific innovation. It's not enough to take things which are off the shelf and just reproduce them. We are looking for companies that are innovative. So that's one.
Sure.
The second is we want the company to have a full-time team. So in many cases, we'll have part-time CEOs. So that's not acceptable.
Okay.
That's the other thing. And then the third thing, in order to be published, is that you need to have at least one investor in the current round, right?
Okay.
So it's okay if you don't have that investor. You should, if you pass the first two criteria, you will get into our pipeline. We'll know which companies are looking for lead investors, and we have our own internal process to help them find those. But to be published, you need to have that one investor in place. But I encourage companies, if they think that they check the first two boxes, they should just create profiles on Propel.
Okay. What if,
so that,
sorry to cut you off, what if they're willing to go full time, but they haven't yet because they haven't gotten an investment round?
Yeah, well, that happens all the time. You need to be full time and dedicated in order for you to get the investments. I do think that people that think that, oh, when I get money, I'll go full time, they won't go get money because they're not full time.
Okay,
it's just a vicious circle.
Okay, sure. Okay. No, okay. So I submit my startup, it meets all the criteria, then what happens?
Then we review it. We have a phone call. If we think it meets our criteria, then we ask them, we say, okay, move forward. We click the button, approved, and then they get an email saying, okay, guys, you're approved. Why don't you create your detailed profile? So initially, we just asked for basic materials. Now, hey, because we are creating a profile online, now you can see what it looks like from the investor's view. You can put in your team, their pictures, a little bit of bio about them, your pitch deck, any other materials you want to upload. Tell us about your funding round, how much you're raising, how much you've already raised, what is the valuation, all that kind of good stuff. And when they say that, then after they've completed their work, then we also review it from our side. So everything has to go through compliance approvals because we are regulated.
Right.
So we review it and we make sure it is compliant, and then we approve it, and it is then published. Once it is published, we send out marketing emails to targeted investors. Obviously, we know what the investor profiles are like, what kind of stuff they've invested in before. So we send them more targeted companies that would interest them. We do all this marketing, and if the company starts getting traction, they have a lot of followers, and then we hold investor calls for these companies, which are recorded and placed on our website again. And so once that happens, then typically investors will come more. So traction is kind of like a snowball effect, right?
Sure, yeah.
Once you start getting some of it, then you get more of it, and so on. And then eventually investors can invest online. So they pledge their interest, and we take them through the document signature process. They can wire their funds, and we close the deal.
Okay, so or is it traditionally one investor invests the entire amount, they only put a certain percentage in, or is it a little bit depending on which deal it is and how much the company's trying to raise?
Yeah, absolutely. It depends on the deal, and it also depends on the investor, right?
Sure.
So we have, I would say, three types of investors.
Okay.
Number one is institutional investors. When we say institution, we're talking about family office, VC, and corporate VC.
Okay.
That's about 25% of our user base. So a quarter of our user base is institutions. And these institutions are both US-based, but also quite a few of them are international.
Okay.
Okay. So that's one user type. The second user type is the professional angel investor. So these are people who have made angel investments before. Several of them, they have a portfolio, they know how to do it, they know what they're about. And typically they will invest anything from $25,000 to $100,000 or $200,000.
Okay.
Institutions could invest anything from $200K to upwards of $1 million.
Okay.
And then the third type is what we call the amateur investor, who haven't made so many investments before. And if they are a professional, then they're looking to diversify and take smaller bets online, right? And so they invest anything from, so our minimum is $3,000,
Okay.
So these investors would invest anything from $3,000 until, let's say, $15,000 or $20,000 maybe. So those are the three types of investors. So it depends a lot on who's investing. So for example, if you get an institutional investor, then they would invest 200, 250K and then go up from there. And if you get the interest of a professional angel investor, you might find they might invest 100 to 200K up from there. And if you get the interest of smaller angel investors, typically smaller angel investors tend to follow. If the deal is picking speed, then they tend to follow that. So usually it's good to have at least one or two anchor professional angel investors, and then other people can also join the deal. So that's the way that works.
Okay. No, that makes a lot of sense. And so there's a startup gets investment. Walk us through, are the investors and you guys kind of hands-on or hands-off or a little bit of both, or how does that relationship kind of work?
After the investment round is over?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're quite hands-off.
Okay.
I mean, to the extent that the startup wants to involve investors from PropelX, we certainly communicate quite a bit.
Okay.
And then, but it's not as though we take governance roles. So we won't sit on their board. We won't have board observer rights or any such thing. But we do ask that the startup send us quarterly updates so we can update the investors, right? So we ask for bullet point updates as to, did you get new customers? Did you get revenues? Did you get a new team member? Did you have a scientific breakthrough? All that kind of thing. They can send it to us in bullet points. We do ask for that. We require that we get quarterly updates. But when it comes to actually involving investors, individual investors in specific kind of activities, we keep it pretty hands-off. To the extent that a startup wants to involve an investor, they can do so. But it's pretty hands-off.
Okay. No, very cool. So you mentioned you've had a bunch of exits now. Walk us through how much involvement did you have in that, or not really much at all, but there's success stories for PropelX.
Yeah, we didn't have any involvement in that, to be honest. We did reap the rewards. I think that was good for our investors in that they got multiples of their money back. But so far, we've not engineered these exits. We've not made the introductions, etc. Although that's something that we are certainly working on.
Sure. Yeah, but you made the original, obviously, like you matched the startup and the investors. So you did a lot of the work early on. So no, I think that's awesome. So
yeah, absolutely.
So I'm curious. You have this for experts section on the website. What exactly is that about, and how does it help?
Yeah, absolutely. That's actually a very important part of PropelX, and it's one of our key differentiators. So the thing is, one of the things that we learned early on at MIT Angels is that companies based in science and technology are hard to evaluate. Primarily because people don't have the expertise to evaluate them. For example, if there is a new battery technology, right?
Yep.
The average individual, even people that are knowledgeable, may not be experts in chemistry. So does this specific chemistry work? Will it scale? Will it work at scale? Is there a supply chain to produce for the materials that go into the electrolyte or the electrodes or whatever? Where are there supply constraints? Are there price fluctuations? We don't know everything about that specific product. And the average investor, even though they may be an expert angel investor, they may not have expertise in that particular technology.
Right.
So typically what you do is you call your friends, and you'll have a friend who's a chemist, for example, or a battery technology expert, and ask them, hey, what do you think of this? That's how it works offline. But online, we wanted to replicate that, so we created our own network of experts. So at this point, there's 1,200 plus experts. There are some very famous people who are in our expert network and have shared their opinions on specific companies. So the way it works is experts just register, and when they register, they share keywords of what their expertise is. Similarly, when a startup registers, they share keywords of what their startup is about. We match those up, and we find out who are the people that are experts. We'll come out with a list of experts for each company, and we invite them to participate in Q&A. So there will be a panel of 3 to 5 experts that gives opinion on every company on PropelX. And they answer all kinds of questions. So investors can submit questions, but we also have a set of standard questions that we use, which are both quantitative and qualitative in nature. And so the experts will share their opinions. And the 3 to 5 experts may have divergent views on a specific topic, or they may have similar views on a specific topic. And that helps the investors just understand the company better, evaluate it better.
Sure. No, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
No, very cool. So I'm curious to talk about deal flow a little bit, because you guys are looking for these really big revolutionary ideas. Is it hard to find startups that meet your criteria, or how does that work?
No, turns out that, like I said, the government actually invests quite a bit in such companies every year. In fact, the SBIR program in total invests about $2.5 billion every year in 5,000 small companies. Yeah. So it's the biggest seed fund of America, and that basically is a lot of deal flow for someone like us.
Okay.
Right?
Sure.
So we don't have any shortage of deal flow. We have more than we can handle.
Okay. So,
and we have quite excellent deal flow because, hey, anything that receives a grant from the SBIR Foundation or from the SBIR program is actually pre-vetted, or it's vetted by experts. So they have their own criteria to invest, right?
Right.
So we know this company has gone through the ringer with the SBIR already, and here it is out on the other side, and now it's applying to PropelX. So we get excellent deal flow, high quality deal flow. And I would say that's one of our key differentiators, and we hear this over and over again by our users, that they keep coming back to PropelX because we have great deal flow.
No, that's awesome. Well, and I guess from the investor side, it can take a lot of time and energy to find any deals, never mind these big world-changing ideas like you guys have on your site, right?
Yes, absolutely. So yes, and that is the key problem that platforms like ours are solving.
Right.
Which is that the problem of access. Look, there's 12.5 million accredited investor households.
Okay.
Per an SEC report of several in the US alone.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Per an SEC report of just a few years back, I think from 2015 or something.
Okay.
12.5 million households. And yet if you look at how many active angel investors are there are different numbers. And I do believe that these numbers are underreported. So according to, there's a Center for Venture Research at University of New Hampshire that tends to report that there's angel investors about 250,000 in number. I mean, that's not even a small fraction of the percentage of accredited investor households, right?
Right.
So this market is really nascent. Very few people have access. And that access typically is limited to Silicon Valley and Boston area or New York, East Coast and West Coast. And people in the middle of America, where there's a lot of wealth, they have no access to startups at all. Right. So they are not diversified. They don't have, so if you think of portfolio allocation, right? Let's say you're a wealthy person, you're thinking of how should I use my money? Well, you put some into stocks, you put some into bonds, you put some into real estate, and then what?
Sure.
right? Then
Yeah.
what? Then you put, okay, let me put it into a couple of private equity or venture capital funds, and you can then invest directly. So these are alternative investments, and unfortunately, access has been extremely limited. And that is the key problem we solve by having an online platform, which is accessible from anywhere via the internet.
Right. So how does it work then if I meet all the investor criteria? I can be an accredited investor, but I've never actually done any investments outside of letting somebody else just handle it. Do I need to get pretty educated before I use the platform to start investing? Or what is my level of education around being my own investor and managing my own investments need to be?
So I don't think you need to be educated like in the traditional way that we think of education. You don't have to be a finance professional.
Okay.
You don't have to know all the financial jargon, all that. That's not what is required. But educated to the extent of, should I learn more about the industry? Should I learn more about the competitors to this company? Yes. I think people should learn how to do diligence, and we provide a lot of resources for that. We regularly host webinars. We interview other angel investors who are successful. A lot of it is on our blogs as well. We discuss how to do diligence for these kinds of companies. And then, of course, we have our network of experts. You can always ask them any question. So I would say, while you don't need to be an expert in anything, you should try to do diligence before you invest. So that's number one. Do your diligence before you make an investment. Ask the right questions. But following close on the heels of do your diligence is the following advice.
Okay.
Start small.
Sure.
Do not invest $100,000 in your first deal. Start small. Invest $3,000, $5,000, $10,000, depending on your net worth.
Sure.
And the reason you should start small is because the third piece of advice is build a portfolio. Right. So if you have, let's say, $50,000 available,
okay,
right, and you want to build a portfolio, you should then invest no more than $5,000 in 10 companies at least.
Right. I see.
So build a portfolio, because these companies are so high risk, and very often the risks are beyond our ability to foresee or influence,
Sure.
and they're not in our hands. So there is a high degree of failure of these companies. And so one should go in expecting that not every company will succeed. However, do your diligence as though, to the same level for each company as every single company you expect to succeed.
No, I think that's actually really good advice, right? And I think if, like, to your $50,000 example, if you spread that out over, a handful of companies and you hit one, I think you're doing good, right?
Yes,
obviously,
absolutely.
if you hit more than one, you're going to be happy, but
yes, of course.
No,
yeah.
Very cool. So we're kind of coming to the end, but I really want to get your thoughts on, is there anything or myths or anything that you want to demystify for either the startup or the investor that you hear maybe all the time or see all the time?
Well, for the startup, I would say it's a journey,
Okay.
Fundraising, there is no magic bullet. You need to make sure you are leveraging all of the resources, and think of Propel X and all other platforms as just one more source of capital. Don't bank on it to provide the entire round for you, but bank on it to the extent that, okay, it's going to help me get a few $100,000 out of my round of $1 million or $1.5 million that I'm raising. So that's okay. And the other thing I would say is engage with investors. Okay. So very often we see startups thinking, okay, the platform is going to do its thing and magically money will materialize. Nah. If you see people following you, send them messages, send them nice notes, look up their backgrounds on LinkedIn and see if they may be a good fit, where they could be of help, engage the users. I think that's very important.
Sure.
Because we've seen that those startups that actually raise the most round do what we call, they close their own deal. They bring their round together by engaging their investors.
Smart.
So that's very important. On the investor side, I would just say, in terms of demystifying, well, angel investing is right now, I would say, relatively limited in that not many people do it.
Sure.
But I think platforms like Propel and others are changing how that happens.
Sure.
So very soon, people all over the country will have knowledge of these, will have access to these kinds of opportunities. And I think investors should just be open to these new kind of ideas, open to get educated and start small. Like I said,
Sure.
Start small, build a portfolio, do your diligence. That's what I would say to investors.
No, I think that's really good advice. And I think the thing, even before I talked to you the first time and just talking to people over the last few years, is there's a lot of people, like you mentioned, that could invest, but they don't want to put in $50K into one company or more money than that. But they don't realize that they can start investing in companies for $3,000, right? And that's a long way away from $50K, and it's really inexpensive. So you could start out saying, I'm just going to take $10,000, put it into a couple of companies and see what happens, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Again, invest only as much as you can afford to lose, because these are risky companies.
Sure. But it doesn't need to be $150K to invest in 3 startups.
No,
it can
exactly.
be $9,000, I guess, in 3 startups, right?
Yes, precisely. And that's how one should start, is small.
Sure.
$9,000 and 3 startups is a good way to start.
Yeah, no, and I think that's really good advice. And that's why I wanted to reiterate that, because I think a lot of people don't think of it as being that inexpensive. Like if you have $200,000 or $300,000 a year you're making, $9,000 doesn't seem that daunting, right? Of money that you're willing to potentially lose, but $150,000 is a lot of money.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Sure.
And to put things in perspective, $9,000 would buy you 9 shares of Google, thereabouts.
Yeah. Okay. No, fair enough. Interesting. Yeah. That is a really good way of putting it. But we're kind of coming to the end. So how about we close with mentioning where people can get more information about you guys and any other links you want to mention?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, check us out at propelx.com. So that's spelled at propelx.com. And I think people should read our FAQ, because that does describe exactly how things work. So I think that would be good. And join us as experts, whether you've been an entrepreneur, you're an angel investor, you're an academic. We have experts of all kinds. We have professors from MIT, from Stanford. We have professionals. We have former NASA scientists.
Very cool.
We have really good experts. So I do invite people to join us as experts, list their companies on Propel, join us as investors.
Perfect. Well, I really appreciate you again taking time into your day to be on the show, and I look forward to keeping in touch with you, and have a good rest of your day.
Thank you, Kevin. Likewise.
Thank you. Okay. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening. Please visit our website at buildingthefutureshow.com to join the free community, sign up for our newsletter, or to sponsor the show. The music is done by Electric Mantra. You can check him out at electricmantra.com and keep building the future.